President Trump taking a victory lap on tariffs, and he's bringing the receipts to prove it. The president says tariffs weren't an economic disaster. They were an American comeback. Welcome to the Big Money Show, everyone. I'm Jackie DeAngelis, along with my co-hosts Taylor Riggs, Jerry Willis, Brian Bremberg, and with us for the hour, Rosecliff founder and managing partner, Mike Murphy.
Hey.
Okay.
Hey, guys.
In a Wall Street Journal op-ed published late on Friday, President Trump says the so-called economic experts were flat out wrong. They warned that tariffs would crash markets, spike inflation, and tip the economy into recession. So far, none of that has happened. Instead, the economy boomed. American workers, well, they're not just feeling it, but Wall Street bankers too. Look at this milestone. For the first time in 26 years, the United States is producing more steel than they are in Japan, a turnaround that the administration says was driven directly by tariffs. We are seeing the economy orthodoxy disproven in real time. Record stock market highs, strong GDP growth, and falling inflation. Proof that tariffs didn't weaken the economy. They actually strengthened America's leverage. And the president laid it out, taking a pretty well-earned victory lap, I would say, Mike, because the economic doom and gloom that was being portrayed and peddled out via the media last April during Liberation Day, you literally thought the world was going to implode. And it hasn't. Actually, a lot of revenue has been generated as a result of this. Our negotiating leverage has increased. The steel example is one. Manufacturing is coming back home here to the United States.
Absolutely. Well said. And I think the timing of this is interesting because we talk about some numbers coming out on consumer confidence and how the consumer in this country isn't very comfortable with where they are or where they're going. And I think a lot of that is from the media, because those same people who were telling you inflation's going to come and this is never going to work and it's going to cause a recession are kind of still saying, well, it hasn't come yet. But I mean, look at Jerome Powell. He's still talking about this potential for inflation coming from tariffs that we just haven't seen. That hasn't come. I still don't think it's going to come. So President Trump laid out this plan, and it worked perfectly. Everything, and from the things you point out, and I'll add trade deals on top of that, and then money coming back into this country, manufacturing. It's just the beginning, really, because these things don't pay dividends for us as an economy and then stop. They continue. So this is the first inning of what I think could be a boom for U.S. AI, manufacturing, the economy as a whole. And that's for blue collar, white collar, all Americans.
And I think the story this year for 2026 primarily will be focused on growth. Taylor, you talk about this all the time. The president penned in this op-ed. He said, in the third quarter of 2025, gross domestic product growth was booming 4.4%. And despite the Democrat-induced shutdown last fall, which cost us at least 1 point, the fourth quarter is projected by the Atlanta Fed to be well over 5%, a number like our country has not seen in many years.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the other economic data that we got this morning that shows signs of life. Factory activity, Jackie, you talked about that in your intro, has surged more than expected to now the highest since August of 2022. We are back in expansion for the first time in 12 months. It's driven by employment that's up in manufacturing and new orders that are up. We've seen signs of life before, and then manufacturing slips back into a recession. But if new orders are up, that maybe gives us leeway that this time it is sustainable. Let's talk about those new orders. Increased by a 10-point jump, back up to 57.1. Above 50 expansion, below 50 contraction, so well into expansionary territory. Export orders also rose, and more importantly, industry breadth did better. 9 out of 18 sectors saw growth last month. That was only 2. So it's expanding. We could also talk about tariffs, and if it's for what am I trying to say? Like a national security concern. Sorry, a little slow on the uptake on this Monday. Rare earths, the investment that they're thinking of making with rare earth stocks, that further proves the point that if we're trying to take on China, if we're going to drill, baby, drill for rare earths here in America, are tariffs worth it if we think rare earths are a national security issue? And how are we thinking about stockpiling, not just a strategic petroleum reserve, but stockpiling rare earths? So I think all of this sort of vision comes back to that op-ed, Jackie, where you're thinking about about growth, the numbers, and how tariffs have or have not, and we could argue have, played a role in that.
Okay, next paragraph. After he talks about growth, he goes on to inflation. He talks about core inflation the past 3 months, Brian, just 1.4%, far lower than almost anyone other than me, meaning himself, had predicted. He goes on to talk about wages. The typical worker saw a wage increase of $1,000 or $2,000, even more than that last year, increasing much faster than consumer prices. There was a period during the Biden administration when inflation had spiked so high that there was a tipping point. The overall top line number started to come down, but that core number was really pesky for them.
I remember those
And they
days.
love citing the core number because it strips out food and energy, which are the most volatile. And so, you know, we have to look at the core number. But when the core number wasn't working for them, they didn't want to look at the core number anymore. This is a really strong core number. It means that aside from food and energy, those other things like housing and cars and secondhand cars, all of those things are starting to come down significantly.
You could have written this op-ed. You make a strong case right here. That's pretty good.
He did well on his own.
Do you want to know something I saw in this op-ed I've never, ever seen in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal? There were 6 paragraphs in this op-ed that ended with an exclamation point. I've never seen an exclamation point in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, my
6
goodness,
paragraphs
you
ended
are
with,
right.
Okay, so here's a thought experiment I did when I read this, because the title is My Tariffs Have Brought America Back. But suppose Kamala Harris would have won, and she would have done the Trump tariffs. Do you think that would have brought the American economy back?
No.
Murphy's thinking about it.
So it's tough. You're kind of no, but I just can't see her. She doesn't believe in any part of what he did, like in that whole
the
side
buttressing aspects of tariffs.
You're on it, like okay. So what is it that he believes in, right? There's a paragraph buried in the middle of this that I think is really important. It's like the fulcrum paragraph. He says the entire Trump economic agenda deserves credit for this explosive growth and good news. Okay, so what I would, if the only thing I'd quibble with in this op-ed, besides all the exclamation points, maybe, is I would say his pro-America policies have brought this economy back, because tariffs are part of it, but if Kamala Harris did tariffs and all her other stuff, it would have tanked the economy. I feel 100% confident about that.
I agree.
But he did tariffs, okay, but he did it in the context of deregulation and tax cuts and his nonstop, relentless salesmanship of the U.S. economy. And when you put economists...
And unleashing energy.
Yes, and energy, and economists have never modeled that before. Literally, no economist has ever modeled the Trump thing that he did right here, which is why they all had the wrong prediction. But he did something different. And the thread that runs through it, I don't think is tariffs. It's pro-American, and that's why the economy has come back.
And Jerry, one of the things that he's been calling for is lower rates. Lower rates may or may not be on the way immediately, but they have come down substantially. I know you cover housing a lot. It is becoming a little more affordable, even though there's some ways to go.
Yeah.
But let's put rates over here for a second, because it's not just necessarily about that with respect to what he did. The dollar was weakening, and we have a lot of guests that come on the show, and they worry about that weak dollar. You put Warsh in. Warsh wants to strengthen the dollar. It actually looks like what the president is trying to do is get to an equilibrium point, to Brian's point, where he strengthens everything and he tackles every aspect of this equation.
I think you may have that right. And when it comes to housing, one of the things that people are missing right now is in a third of the metro areas in this country, housing prices are falling.
Yes.
So I believe that great ship, which is the housing ship, is already turning. And we know from the NAR, the National Association of Realtors, there are expectations that existing home sales will rise 14% this year. So the new Fed chief may be riding the back of that improvement. Before we move on, though, I just want to say this about that, because the whole 5% number in terms of growth, I agree with you, Brian. This is about a lot of things, not just tariffs, right? And I went back and looked at the number of times the U.S. economy since World War II has experienced 5% or better growth, only 33 times. only 5 quarters since 1984. This is a rarity. And why is this happening? Because Donald Trump is putting in place policies that is making growth likely, that is reassuring a lot of CEOs out there that now is a good time to spend. Look, he is the Margaret Thatcher of his era. Everybody else, if you listen, and I'm just going to say something nasty about your friends among the economists.
Sure.
I was told in economics class, you know, the U.S. is a maturing economy. It can't grow that fast. No way. Wrong. Wrong. And Donald Trump is proving that. And Margaret Thatcher, of course, played out that whole scenario in Great Britain.
Taylor, we're going to get to Disney in 1 second, but I want to get your take on this because I love this headline. USA Today. Companies reporting earnings. They're doing just fine despite tariffs. And that is what you have been seeing in the data.
Yeah, I mean, what, 15% year over year by some estimates. We're maybe almost about halfway through the season or so. Last week was a big week. This week's going to be another big week for the S&P 500. And to your, Jerry, your point about a mature economy, if you would tell me that revenue could grow 8% year over year in a multi-trillion-dollar economy, and the bottom line of these companies with AI, with productivity, could jump 15% year over year, I would be shocked, and yet they are doing it. And I remind our viewers, that's not versus low expectations. That is legit just year over year numbers, growing top line 8% revenue. That usually is like, you're lucky if your top line revenue tracks with GDP of a couple percent.
So an AI, I mean, I know that we're looking at some of the AI darlings. They haven't like plummeted. They're kind of holding, but some others are coming up along with it. AI has been a huge part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of productivity that can also, again, grow our way out of debt. That's an interesting point, too. Buried in another paragraph is he says something that Larry Kudlow has often told us. Growth does not cause inflation. And we could talk about how Kevin Warsh is going to maybe go in and transform the Federal Reserve to get that model in there, that you can have a high growth economy, but that doesn't mean that that leads to inflation. And I think Larry Kudlow and others have sat on this panel and said, you can't have above 3% GDP growth because then it's too hot and then you're going to get inflation. Then that's why we need restrictive rates to cool everything off. Jackie, I'd also bring you this, that Trump is just saying that the United States is going to charge a reduced reciprocal tariff, lowering it from 25% to 18%. So we're going to get some ideas on what exactly that means. It looks like it might be with regards to India specifically. And so, again, how he's using tariffs as a tool. And, Jackie, you've nailed this. You always say it's the opening negotiating strategy, and it looks like, again, that that's what this is.
Okay, and I'm just reading a few more headlines here on this Indian news. They will likely, this is coming from the president, they will likewise move forward to reduce their tariffs and non-tariff barriers against the United States to zero. That's important on the tariff aspect, but this was a huge part of the president's tariff strategy as well, at least his negotiating style. On Liberation Day, when he started so high and the Wall Street Journal was predicting that the economy was going to crash as a result of it, he was very concerned about non-tariff barriers, Mike. And he has successfully lowered tariffs and negotiated with each country and worked on some of these issues. This is something that no other president could really get a handle on, was to get other countries to play better by the rules, not just what was, sort of numerically on paper. And China, of course, is the big outlier. It's the one that's left, and he's still working on that. But it just demonstrates how much progress has been made.
Absolutely. And if you think back to when the tariffs first came out, we had a 20% correction in the market almost instantaneously. And President Trump stuck with the plan, and slowly but surely it started to move in the right direction. And now, I think if I summed it up in kind of one sentence, he wanted, take India, for example, they'd been charging us tariffs for the longest time. So he was saying, if you're going to charge us, reciprocal tariffs are coming your way.
Right.
You can take them to zero, we'll stay at zero. And yet there were people here in the United States that were against that for some reason.
Right.
So now he's leveled the playing field for you, for me, for all Americans, and that's good. And that's really part of what we're saying is why the economy is booming is because we're now on a fair playing field.
And I love this on Truth Social as well. The prime minister also committed to, quote, buy American at a much higher level, in addition to over $500 billion of U.S. energy technology, agriculture, coal, and many other products. Brian, this speaks to what you were talking about. He's getting people to do what he wants them to do.
He's checking for the exclamation point.
There's no exclamation point in that one, but there's a word in there that you would have you'd have never seen in there.
Coal.
Yes.
Yes.
I knew
Like,
it.
it's the illustration, okay? Like, he defies everything. Coal would never have, even for the last many Republican presidents, coal would not have been in there. Coal is in there. Nobody's ever done tariffs where the other guy gets a bigger tariff and they buy $500 billion worth of your stuff, including the thing that was politically incorrect 10 years ago or whatever. You can't, like, economic models can't measure what the entrepreneur will do because you don't know ahead of time what they'll do. They're an X factor. That's why economists are always wrong about the future. He is the political entrepreneur X factor that breaks everybody's rules because he doesn't play within the boundaries economists need to model the world. And that's why this has been so hard for economists. But I think it's been good for America because, again, the thread is we can sell them coal, so we will. We can sell them energy, we will. Things we can sell them, he will fight for, and now they're buying $500 billion worth.
And can I tell you, there is an exclamation point in this string of, not tweets, sorry, Truth Social, you call them socials? Truths? He says, truths. Truths, okay. He says, Prime Minister Modi and I are two people that get things done, something that cannot be said for most, exclamation point. It is impressive. I mean, look, this is amazing what's going on here, in my view. This helps us, for sure.
Well, India was a big one hanging out there. And we talked about this months ago. We thought it was going to happen. It didn't. Here it is. Probably good timing for the president.
Well, and Jackie, when I was talking about that factory orders, the ISM manufacturing, a lot of people were speculating this is trying to move orders from China to other tariff-friendly countries. If that is the case and you get big deals like this, you would expect to further see that if you're getting a reciprocal tariff of 18 instead of 25, and that hopefully then bodes well for future new orders coming in the pipeline.
You want those orders with countries that you're doing trade with that are, more advantageous than what is happening with us in China.